Good afternoon. Thanks for joining me. I really do appreciate your willingness to spend some of your precious time with me, and hopefully you'll find this information helpful. I do see some names that I recognize on the list here and some other ones that I don't. So, just as a quick background, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Brian Sanderoff, and I'm a regularly trained pharmacist. I used to own two pharmacies in downtown Baltimore at one point. And after being in my practice for about 10 years, I really wanted to take a look and try to determine how I was helping my patients. And I sadly came to realize that giving people the prescription medicines that they were taking for their chronic diseases was not fixing problems. What it was doing was just turning down the volume on what the body was saying. And so the demonstration that I usually give for this is that if you're driving around in your car and you see that little red oil light on your dashboard, illuminate, you have a couple choices. You can take the car to the mechanic and find out what's wrong and get it fixed. Or if you want, just take a piece of black tape and put it over the light and you just don't see it anymore. Well, unfortunately, in medicine, for all of the diseases of aging, all of the chronic diseases, what we do is really just the black tape. So if you have high blood pressure and you're taking a blood pressure medicine, it's not fixing your high blood pressure. It's adjusting your blood pressure, but it's not fixing the underlying problem. If it did, then you'd be able to stop taking that medicine. And those of you who take a prescription medicine for high blood pressure know that you can't stop taking it. And the tendency is, as time goes on, that you need a higher dose, and then you need a second and a third medicine to control that blood pressure. Now, when I was in pharmacy school, and what they teach in medical school is that that is a quote unquote worsening condition. And that couldn't be further from the truth. It's the body adjusting. So the body raises the blood pressure for a specific reason. We ignore what that reason is and we do something to artificially lower the blood pressure. Well, the body in its wisdom says, wait a second, you're not listening to me, and it raises the blood pressure again. And we could just play that game our entire lives. And so the work that I've undertaken is to help educate people so that they understand the true underpinnings of the diseases that we're trying to avoid getting as we get older. And then if you have that knowledge, then you can go ahead and make some changes. And if you want to, you can have a different experience. And oftentimes that different experience means things that we're told couldn't go away, like diabetes or high blood pressure, high cholesterol or cardiovascular disease or, depression, osteoporosis, even cancers can indeed go away. So that's the work that I'm about. Uh, it is very important to me and my organization to act as a resource for the public. And so if you have questions about something, please do not hesitate to get in touch with me. If you go to the website, our phone number, our toll-free number is all over the place. Or you can email me right from the website, or you can email me directly, brian@wellbeinggps.com, and I'll be happy to try to address that question for you. And again, if you have a question as we're going through this presentation today, please just type it right into the box. I also just want to remind everybody that we record these webinars, and so I do them on a monthly basis, and then they end up on the archive on our website, and we probably have 30 or 40 now of all sorts of different topics. And so this topic will be up there come next Monday or Tuesday, but also you can see the full range of the topics that we've covered, and maybe there's some information there for you. So let's go ahead and get started. I know that this is a popular topic for a couple reasons. One, because every time I go to the grocery store, every magazine that you see in the line while you're waiting to check out has something to talk about detoxing and doing this fast or this juice fast or doing this mono diet or whatever. And so I thought it was important to sort of dispel the myths and to, from a biochemical scientific perspective, talk about detoxing, whether or not it's necessary, and what are the best ways to do it if you decide that it is necessary for you. I also know that it's a popular topic because of the number of people that signed up for the webinar. So I know that this is a topic that's on people's minds. And so let's go ahead and get started. So the first question is, do we need to detoxify? Is there a reason to help your body get rid of toxins? And I think what you'll find after the next couple of slides, you'll come to the conclusion that I have, that oftentimes there is a need for it. Then the question becomes, what's the best way to do it? So environmental pollutants are something that we all get exposed to. And it's not just if you happen to live in Los Angeles or breathing in the smog, or whether you happen to work in a paint factory and are exposed to certain chemicals. All of us are exposed to pollutants, and it is impossible to avoid here in this country. So here's the evidence of that. First of all, there was this study that was done in 2005. This was done in the United States. And what they did is they took blood samples from umbilical cords right after babies were born in a hospital. And what they found was that there were toxins in every single one of the babies that were tested. A total of 287 different chemicals that were found. And and again, understand that this is not a little human that's already had exposure to the outside world other than through mom. 180 of them were found to cause cancer, 217 of them are neurotoxic, and 208 of them would cause birth defects. And so this is hard to avoid. Also, every year, the CDC does a report where they do testing from Americans randomly, where they do samples of urine and blood. They do this every 2 years. And what they found was that in their last the last time this came out, was that there were 212 different toxic chemicals that were in quote unquote most Americans, as showing up in their blood or their urine. And there were 6 of them that were found in virtually every single one of the people that were tested. So I want to go through those 6 real fast and talk about them just real quickly so you understand the kinds of things that are contributing to our toxic load and how our bodies are working or not working, however the case may be. All right, so number 1 are PDEs. PDE stands for polybrominated diphenyl ethers. And so these are flame retardants. And so they get used in the environment in all sorts of housing materials, but also even clothing that we wear that is flame retardant, especially children's clothing. The stuff is put into the little nighties that kids wear. And so the result that can show up is sexual dysfunction, thyroid, and brain disorders. The next one is called BPA, which stands for bisphenol A. And so these are plastics. And so these are those plastic bottles that your water comes in, or they're the linings of many cans. And so if you eat an organic can of food, you will see that it might say BPA free. Type 2 diabetes and reproductive issues. You'll find that this reproductive issue thing is a common theme here when it comes to toxins and how the body responds to those toxins. The next ones are called PFOAs, which are perfluorooctanoic acid. So this is the non-stick cookware stuff and stain-resistant clothing treatment. And again, infertility and reproductive problems have been associated. Now, remember, all 6 of these that I'm talking about were found in virtually everybody when blood and urine was tested the last time CDC did their testing. And they do this testing about every 2 years. The last time they did this testing, they actually tested for 72 additional chemicals that they thought may be an issue. Acrylamides, and this is the result of fried foods. We're talking about cancer and neurological dysfunction. So if you're somebody that has French fries often, you are exposing yourself to these acrylamides. Whether that means that's going to result in you getting a specific cancer is really hard to know, because there are a lot of other factors, including your immune function and your lifestyle and blah, blah, blah. But you are working to stack your deck against that when you eat a lot of fried foods. The next one is mercury, obviously, and seafood is a large way that we get exposed to this, especially larger fish, because what happens is larger fish eat smaller fish. And so that concentrates the mercury in the food. And there's many of us who believe that eating fish more than 2 times a week is unhealthy. Brain damage, immune impairment can happen from exposure to mercury. Let me also tell you that there's another major exposure that many of us have, and that's the fillings, those metal fillings that are in our teeth, that the American Dental Association still tries to maintain that is okay to put that mercury in your mouth. And then lastly, and again, all 6 of these found in virtually everybody tested are MTBEs, which are methyl tert butyl ethers. And so this comes from cigarette smoke. And so even if you've never smoked a day in your life, the secondhand smoke that you've been exposed to has likely caused this to be in your body. And again, neurological and reproductive problems. What would be, the common symptoms of a toxic overload, where you might say, oh yeah, I've got those sorts of things, and so maybe I should consider detoxing. Well, I put them in. I sort of categorized them by the kinds of systems that get affected in your body. So neurological issues, headaches, depression, brain fog, memory and balance problems, even all can be related to a toxic overload. Now, understand that headaches can be caused by many, many different things. And so, if you have chronic headaches and you've tried treating it other ways, maybe taking a look at the toxins in your body and how to get rid of them may be helpful for you. Um, Same thing with depression or anything else that you see there. Immune issues. So we're talking about allergies and asthma, rheumatoid and other autoimmune diseases, many cancers, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, all have been associated with toxins in our body. And then all sorts of glandular slash hormonal issues like diabetes or obesity or thyroid issues. And again, fertility problems. I think it's very interesting that when we're exposed to toxins, one of the result from nature is to say this organism may not be in the best shape to reproduce. And I did a webinar a couple months ago about PCOS, about polycystic ovary syndrome. And as it turns out, a major issue with PCOS is the toxins that mom was exposed to when she was pregnant with her daughter. And a high percentage of women these days are showing up with these sorts of issues, and it's directly related to the toxins that mom was exposed to. So, what do we do about it? If you're convinced as I am that toxins may be an issue with us, what do we do? Well, there's two sides to this equation. Number one is we want to reduce our exposures, and there's definitely some strategies that we can do. As I mentioned, one of those really common toxins comes from our plastics, and so not drinking water out of plastic bottles can be helpful for that, and many other things. But a lot of these exposures we can't control because they really don't have anything to do with us. You know, I didn't mention this, but one of the recent studies has shown that jet fuel residue is showing up in human milk samples when moms I've recently had a baby and they're nursing. They've done studies and they found that jet fuel residue is showing up in the milk. And so obviously that's not something that we can necessarily control. Um, my bet is that most of the women that were tested are not pilots and or work for Southwest Airlines where they're getting excess exposure to that. It's because all of us. And so the other part of that equation is what do we do to enhance the body's ability to get rid of these toxins? And we'll talk quite a bit about that. And that's where this whole craze has sort of, come forward is, wow, there's lots of different ways that we can detox, whether that's fasting or herbs or whatever. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more. And again, just want to remind people, if you have a question, just type it into the question box in your control panel and I'll see it right away. Okay, so let's talk about reducing exposure, first of all, from our diet. So there's this thing that's called the Dirty Dozen, and I'm gonna have a screen that shows all of them for you in a second. And these are the 12 fruits and vegetables that are most likely to have contaminants, whether because of the way they're grown or the country that they're grown in and the practices, the agricultural practices. These are known as the Dirty Dozen. And these are ones that if you are going to eat these foods, these are the ones that you should consider spending a little extra on and getting organic so that they don't have those same additives to them. So that's called the Dirty Dozen. Then there's the Clean 15, which are the ones that you don't have to worry about, even when you get them from the regular grocery store. So I'm going to show you a list of those as well. And then if you are going to eat animal proteins, you want to make sure that they're hormone and antibiotic free. You want to try to make sure that they're free range if possible. So if you are eating an animal, whether that's a cow or a chicken, you want it to come as close to it can to how it would normally eat in nature. And so for a cow, that means that they would actually eat grass instead of corn. And for a chicken, they should be pecking around in the yard, eating worms, not Purina chicken chow or whatever it is that they eat. And obviously the additives, the hormones and the antibiotics and all that kind of stuff are not good for us. If you are going to eat fish, you want it to be wild caught fish instead of farmed, because again, the farming conditions make it so that the toxins are, higher. All right, so let's go through those dirty dozen real fast, and so that you can see them there. Celery, peaches, strawberries, apples, blueberries, nectarines, bell peppers, spinach, cherries, kale or collard greens, potatoes, and imported grapes. Those are the dirty dozen. These are the ones that are most likely to be um, infiltrated with different, toxins for us, whether that's um, the preservatives or whether that's the stuff that they use when they're grown. Any surprises on there for you? For me, celery was a big surprise. I don't know why. I just always thought that was sort of innocuous. And as you'll see, other fruits, not as much of a problem. Apples, that's a big one. Obviously, a lot of people eat apples. Let's see, I got a question here from Marissa, and that is, it isn't always easy to tell if it's wild caught fish. Are they required to label it? It really depends on where you are. I don't know that there's a requirement, although if someone is selling wild caught, it's something that they're going to advertise because people are looking for it and because it's a little bit more expensive, and so they need to justify that extra expense. And so the way to go, Marissa, is that if it doesn't say wild caught, you want to assume that it's not. Thanks for the question. I appreciate that. Okay, so that's the dirty dozen. And what I recommend is funny. My son taught me this. He just has it on his phone, and so and I think there's actually an app for it. And so you can just put it on your phone, and that way, when you're at the grocery store, you'll have the list right there. Got a question from Greg here. Those appear to be the most common purchase produce items. They're very good, and the reason that these are the higher treated ones is for that exact reason, because those are big cash crops. um, the farmers want to do everything they can to get the biggest yield out of their farm because they make money from that. And so that's why these things are the higher treated. But when you look at the clean 15, you'll say, oh, those are common ones also. So here are the clean 15 ones. And so onions and avocado and corn and pineapple, and you can see the list there. So these are the ones that you don't have to worry about as much. And so if you're going to eat eggplant, it doesn't make as much sense to spend the extra on getting an organic eggplant, because the way eggplant are grown, it's just not as much of an issue. And so you're sort of hedging the bet when you do it the other way. Um, so, anyways, I like to see avocado on that list because that's a good one for all of us to be eating. So, anyways, that's the clean 15, and I would encourage you. And again, this will be recorded, so you can always refer back to this to get that list. But if you just do a Google search for Dirty Dozen or Clean 15, or do an app search on your phone, you'll find that there are lists for you. Then you can just have them with you and make those decisions as you go to buy each one of those things. So, regular potatoes, not that's part of the dirty dozen, but sweet potatoes, part of the clean 15. Interesting. All right. So you can also look to reduce your exposure from the environment. And so that has to do with how we cook and store our food. And so, obviously you saw that some of those chemicals that all of us are exposed to and carry around inside of us have to do with plastics. And so try not to store your food in that plastic Tupperware. Try to use glass instead. And, drinking water out of plastic bottles. It's interesting because those little plastic bottles that we get, you don't realize, or you might not necessarily think about it, but how long has that water been in that plastic bottle? If it's been in that bottle for 3 days, there's probably not a lot of leaching of that chemical into there. And if the environment where that water has been is controlled, then again, probably not a lot of leaching. But the truth is that you could be drinking bottled water that's been sitting in that bottle in a hot warehouse for 2 years. Under those conditions, a lot of those plastics leach into the water, and then when you drink the water, you're putting them right into your body. And so there's the drinking water, and then microwaving. Never ever do you want to microwave in plastic, because that really causes the leaching of that plastic, those chemicals, into the food. And so if you're going to microwave, just do it in glass. That way, it's much, much safer for you. So that's the story about reducing our exposure. And as I said, I'm a little skeptical that we really have a ton of control over that, because a lot of the chemicals that we're exposed to, we don't have the ability to not get exposed to them. And so Mark told me the audio cut out. Hold on one second here. It looked like it's okay for me. I'm not sure if that's something on your end, Mark. Anyone else having that problem, or is everything okay? Somebody give me a thumbs up. Okay, Matt said good now. All right, sorry about that, Matt. So then there's the whole part about enhancing elimination, and that's what the meat of the talk is about today, is this idea of detoxing and helping your body get rid of these toxins. Now understand that most of these toxins are fat soluble, and that presents a problem because that means that it's much easier for them to incorporate into our cell membranes and get into cells. And part of the purpose of fat in our body is actually to try to store toxins away from the organs. And so all of us are walking around with these fat soluble toxins in the fat that we have in our body. Uh, Interesting story. I helped a patient, this is probably 20 years ago now, detox. And he had spent his adult life, he was already retired, so this is an older guy, but he had spent his adult life working in a paint factory in Dundalk, which is a suburb of Baltimore. And had not worked in that paint factory for a good 20 years. But when we did a detox with him, all of a sudden he started smelling all of those smells that he used to smell while he was in that paint factory. And it's because those toxins he had stored in his fat in his body and was just walking around with them for those 20 years. And those can have an effect on how the body works. So let's talk about enhancing elimination. So first I want to talk about the organs of elimination, because it's not just talking about bowel function here. The liver and the kidneys and the lungs and the skin and the lymph and the bowels are all organs of elimination in the body. The primary organ of elimination is the liver. And I'm going to talk in a little bit of detail about how the liver works and why it's important and what's the best way to support liver function. If the body gets overwhelmed with toxins and or liver is not able to get rid of things as efficiently as it should, then the body will resort to trying to get rid of things another way. The skin is a big, huge organ of elimination, and many people who have skin issues like eczema, really it's because the body is resorting to using the skin as an organ of elimination, and oftentimes that is a reason to detox. And when you do that, the skin clears up amazingly, even though it may look like eczema or may look like acne or something else. So do these organs need assistance? Well, in the days of old, probably not, because our exposure to the chemicals is a relatively new phenomenon. This is something that's only happened since, really the Industrial Revolution. So you're only talking about a couple of hundred years, and that, when looked at from the larger perspective, is just a drop in the bucket of how long we've been here on this planet. But because of our modern times and because of our exposures to chemicals, seemingly newer ones every single day, yes, oftentimes for many of us, these organs do need assistance. So I told you I was going to talk about the liver in a bit of detail, and here we go. So this is the way the liver works. It goes through a process which is called biotransformation. And what happens is that a toxin comes into the body and the liver it'll wage chemical warfare on it. And it does it in a couple of different phases. And so there's phase one, and this is mediated by a group of enzymes that you may have heard about. They're called cytochrome P450. And these are inside the liver cells, hepatocytes. And what they do is these enzymes break down a toxin through various chemical reactions, the main one being oxidation. You know of that process, oxidation. You've heard of everybody taking antioxidants, but you've seen that process in practice all the time, because when you have got something that's metal and it rusts, that's oxidation. Well, this happens in the body as well, and it actually happens as a good thing. But oftentimes these new chemicals that are made when the liver first starts to break down a toxin is actually more reactive and more toxic to our system. And that's where phase two comes in. So in phase two of the detoxification process, that happens when this new chemical is combined with something so that it becomes water soluble so that the body can then eliminate it. That process is called conjugation. And this makes the toxin non-harmful and also, again, water soluble so that we can get rid of it through the various pathways that we would. It's usually some sort of sulfur containing amino acid that is used for this combining process. And that's why cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and cabbage and Brussels sprouts and cauliflower and other foods like garlic or onions or leeks, they all contain sulfur. And those foods help supply the materials needed to complete the detoxification process. Eggs also contain sulfur. We know that. That's why a rotten egg smells like sulfur. This is interesting here. Diets that are higher in protein actually help enhance phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification, and diets that are high in carbohydrates actually dampen this process. And then there's also the potential for phase 3, and there are some clinicians or some scientists that refer to phase 3, which is really just then the removal of the chemical. So that's the elimination part of it. All right, so how do we want to detox? There's a lot of different ways that you've read about that I'm going to talk about here. There's fasting, there are herbal cleanses, there's colon hydrotherapy, even sweating. All of those things are ways that we can get rid of toxins. And so I want to talk a little bit about what's the pluses and minuses about all of these so that you can understand them a little bit and make a decision for yourself about whether that's an appropriate way for you. So let's talk about fasting at first. And so I want to talk a little bit about the biochemical process that happens when you fast. So you stop eating, you just drink water, and the body goes into starvation mode. And what happens is that your body needs sugar to be able to function properly, especially your brain. And so your body will start to access its stored sources of energy or its stores of energy if no energy is coming in from the diet. And we store energy in a couple of different ways. There's a chemical that's called glycogen. This is stored in the muscles and in the liver, and this is a readily usable energy. And so when you need energy and you don't have any energy coming in, your body will use the glycogen stores. And this usually lasts about 20, 25 minutes. Even if all of your glycogen stores are completely filled to capacity, about 20 or 25 minutes of activity, you'll use up that glycogen. The body also stores energy as fat, and that is not as readily usable source of energy. Your body also has the ability to take protein and break that down into components, including sugar. So when you go into starvation mode, your body will use up glycogen. It will start to use up some fat, but in its wisdom, it says, wait a second, this fat is stored energy for tomorrow. I'm going to break down some protein and use that for energy as well. And there's a waste product from that process that are called ketones. And so those of you who are familiar with the Atkins diet, back in the day when people used to do that, they used to measure to make sure that they were getting actually into ketosis, that those ketones were showing up. Ketones can be used by the brain as energy, just like sugar can. That's why your body has that mechanism and its ability to do it. But also remember that I said that the body stores toxins, especially all of those bad fat-soluble toxins, in the fat. So when you start to mobilize fat as energy, you loosen toxins in your system. That can be a good thing because then you can get rid of them. That's why when you're fasting, you got to drink a lot of water. However, you also have the possibility to overload your system. And so if you are chronically ill, if you're on prescription medicines, if there's any chance that liver isn't working optimally, and let me tell you, that's the chance for many of us, fasting may actually make you worse instead of better. And also remember, I went back to phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1, the liver does with the cytochrome P450 enzymes. Phase 2, you are relying on sulfur-containing nutrients to be able to carry that out. But if you're fasting, you're not ingesting any of those nutrients. And so you have to be careful here because they actually make you worse instead of better. And so if you are going to undertake fasting as a way of detoxing, my recommendation is that you ease into it. And now I'm a faster. I've done some pretty intense fasts, and you have to do it properly. And so what that means is that maybe once every 2 weeks you take a day to fast. And so maybe a Sunday, every other Sunday, you completely fast, which means that all you do is drink water, and you drink a lot of water. And then you also can take some supplements that can support that phase 2 detoxification. So that means some herbs like milk thistle and some sulfur containing amino acids like acetyl L-carnitine or N-acetylcysteine, NAC. If you do that, then you're going to give your body the chance to get rid of those toxins appropriately without getting into problems. And then after you've done that for a few months, where you've gone through 6 or 8 single day fasts, then you might try a 3-day fast. So the longest fast that I've ever done is a 10-day fast, and that means no foods at all, just water, no juices, but some significant herbal support as you went through that process, and actually felt amazing afterwards. When you're not eating and your body doesn't have to expend energy on digestion and all that goes along with that, it can use that energy for other things. And so it can be tremendously helpful. If you do a fast like that, again, ease into it, get your body, in a condition to be able to do it, do liver supporting things, avoid doing things that aren't good for your liver, like drinking alcohol and caffeine. And then you can do it. And I will tell you that my personal experience is that you learn about your emotional eating when there's no food available. Because I would be fasting, and I would we started this fast up in the mountains at a resort for 3 days with a whole bunch of people, and then when I got home I just continued the fast for another 7 days. So I'm at home with the family and the kids running around, and all the trials and tribulations that happen with family life and work and all that kind of stuff. And I would find myself standing in front of the pantry looking for something to eat. And then I'd say, oh, wait a second, I'm fasting. I'm not eating anything. And then 10 minutes later, I was back there just unconsciously. And so it was a good lesson for me about how oftentimes we're eating not because we're hungry, but because, we're lonely or bored or nervous or anxious or whatever. Marissa's asking a question, and that is, do you exercise while fasting? You have to be careful about that. Exercising is important because that enhances your body getting rid of these toxins. And as we said, as the liver turns these toxins into water-soluble compounds, then you can pee them out, but you can also sweat them out. And that's where exercise comes in. And exercising encourages your body to use up more of the fat. You just don't want to overdo it because your system is in a state where you don't have as much energy available because you're not eating anything. And so more gentle exercise. You're not going to go out and run a marathon while you're fasting, but going out for walks in nature, doing yoga, that kind of thing, that's the way to exercise with that. Good question. Thank you for that. So how about modified fasting, where people do things like a juice fast? And so this way you're getting some calories and you're getting some nutrition that your body can use for energy as well as to help with that phase 2 detoxification. And I'm a big fan of doing that. And so maybe the way to ease into fasting, if you're interested in doing that, is to start with like a juice fast. And I'm not talking about orange juice. I'm talking about actually juicing those cruciferous vegetables and using some onion or some garlic and then maybe some apple in there for the flavor and a little bit of sugar from that. And that's a great way to do it. I also meant to mention that if you look at many healing traditions in throughout history, many of them started with some sort of detox before you would actually go to the healer. So if there was something wrong with you when you went to the healer, oftentimes they might say, go home and fast for 3 days and then come back. And that was to start the process and get the toxins out. And then also, many religious traditions have some sort of fasting as part of their tradition, whether that's Yom Kippur in the Jewish tradition, or Ramadan for Muslims, or Lent for Christians. Oftentimes, the real root of these sorts of activities came back to health as well as the spiritual thing. Maybe even kosher diet. Or there's also another way of modifying the fast is just doing a mono diet. So just having one food that you eat, like apples or like that cabbage thing that you hear about. But again, same cautions. if you're just eating one food, you're probably cutting back on your nutrients as well as the sugar that's available, and you want to do something to support the liver while you're going through that process to make sure that you have the ability to get rid of the toxins that you're loosening when you do that. There are all sorts of herbal cleanses that you can find on the market, and there are ones that we use here in our office with our patients that are whole kits that put together a diet, a very specific diet, which usually is cutting down on animal proteins and eventually, being vegetarian and using the kinds of foods that help your body get rid of those toxins, as well as using specific herbs like milk thistle or NAC or those sorts of things. NAC stands for N-acetylcysteine, and it's a sulfur-containing amino acid that the body will use in that conjugation process to get those more toxic toxins to turn into something that, one, is innocuous, and two, that the body can get rid of. Milk thistle helps the liver make more glutathione, and glutathione is a chemical that the body uses to wage that chemical warfare on your toxins. All right. And again, herbs specifically to help with that phase 3 is things that will help your body get rid of the toxins. And so I'm talking about things like fibers, because fiber is sort of the broom that sweeps the toxins out of your body, when you have a bowel movement. And plenty and plenty of water to help urinate out and sweat out these toxins as well. If your sweaty feet have a particularly bad odor to them, or your body odor is particularly bad, that is usually caused by the body getting rid of toxins. And when I've gone through cleanses where I've gotten the toxins out of my body, when I sweat, there's really not an odor to it like there is normally. So usually that's an indication of a need to, maybe detox as well. So then where do we come to? Well, what we come to is for everybody, every one of us, to be a nerd. And if we are just being nerds, we will detox. So here it is. A stands for avoid the controllable exposures that we talked about. So drinking out of plastics and microwaving in plastics and eating foods that are on the dirty dozen that aren't organic. Those are the controllable exposures, not cooking in not cooking in non-stick cookware, all that sort of stuff. The N in being a nerd stands for nutrition. And again, these are the foods that supply us with the sulfur-containing nutrients that allow us to undertake the phase 1 and phase 2 detox that's important for our body to get rid of these toxins. And so really concentrating on the green leafies and the cruciferous vegetables and the onions and leeks and garlic. One of my favorite foods is to make Brussels sprouts with leeks and garlic. It tastes great. You just roast them, and that is power punched. And I'll also tell you that there are certain times of year when it seems like the body benefits more or more easily goes through detox. And it has to do with nature and the way the body works. And so we go through our winter not having as many fruits and vegetables, at least for the vast majority of time that we've been here on this planet, having as many fruits and vegetables available to us, and really just eating the animal proteins that we've stored up for the winter. And then when spring hits, that's when it's time for spring cleaning. That's inside and outside. So we all spring clean our houses. Well, same thing with our bodies. And that's also the time when those foods are first available to us. As the spring comes, that's when those green leafies come, and the bitters, and the all those cruciferous vegetables. So that's the time to do that. And so if you want to do a cleanse, the spring or the fall is an excellent time to do the cleanse. Okay, so that's the N. Anybody guess what the E is for? Exercise. And again, that enhances our body getting rid of junk. We access our stored energy and we use it, which means that we loosen up some of those toxins from those fat cells, and we sweat, so we lose toxins that way, or have the body's ability to get rid of toxins that way as well. The R in NERD stands for rest. Really, really important. I did a whole webinar about sleep. I would encourage you to go and listen to that because it's kind of interesting. But very specifically, the key time for our liver to do its job is between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. And that needs to happen when we're asleep. So when we're not asleep during those hours, our liver can't do its job as efficiently. And so the adage is that for every hour of sleep that you miss between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., it takes 2 hours to make up as far as the biochemical processes in the body. So especially if you are detoxing, like you decide that you're going to do a fast, napping is really helpful, and especially making sure that you're getting to bed earlier, really, really important. And then the D stands for detoxification, in living a nerd lifestyle. And the detoxification, all the things that we just talked about. If you want to do a specific program, if you shoot me an email, I'll give you the names of a couple that we use. One of them is by a company called Metagenics, and it's called Clear Change. It lasts about 10 days. Another one is by a company called Standard Process, and that's a 21-day process. And you get these kits that give you all of the supplements that you'll take while you're doing it, plus very specific guidebooks and online support to help you as you go through it with what you should be eating, as you ease into it, the kinds of activities that you should be doing to allow your body to get rid of those toxins as efficiently as possible. And they're all medically managed. They're all medically designed, which I think is really important, because that's how you make sure that you're getting all of the nutrition that you need to enhance and not make yourself worse instead of better. I'll also tell you that we have a detox questionnaire. I haven't been able to get it online, but if you email me, and if you're interested, email me. I'll email you a copy of it, and you just answer some questions, and then you get a score. And the score will tell you whether you need to detox or not, or whether it's likely that your health would be positively affected by detoxing. So if you email me at brian@wellbeing.gps.com and say, hey, I want the detox questionnaire, I'll email you a copy of it that you can fill it out and sort of have the question for yourself. So we're getting to the end of it. Now's a good time to type in any last minute questions. Okay, good question from Christy. How can you detoxify children? Okay, so really good question. So number one, my first thing is to say, well, children don't need it as much because they haven't been around as long and been as long exposed to the things that we've been exposed to. But I also told you about that study about how we're finding toxins in the umbilical cords. And so it's happening more and more. The best way to do it is by dietary means, by making sure that they're getting those fruits and vegetables that we know help the body detox. Understand that a young liver is going to work more efficiently than an older liver does. And so, those kids haven't been exposed, hopefully, to the alcohol that we've exposed ourselves to, or the caffeine, or whatever. And so it calls for being more gentle and really doing it through dietary means, and also making sure that they're getting the fibers. If bowel function isn't what it should be, meaning at least having one bowel movement a day, that's a reason to be concerned, because then you can sort of have a buildup of those toxins. And so, fibers and/or probiotics, good bacteria, can help fix that problem, as well as dietary adjustments. And also, keep in mind and take seriously that little fact that I gave you that said that protein-rich diets are ones that enhance or encourage detoxification by the liver, and carbohydrate-rich diets just the opposite. And so many of our kids are carb junkies. We have them on too many grains, and so starting to get them off of grains will help with that as well. Renee is asking, is that Brian, or Byron? It's Brian with an I, Brian at wellbeinggps.com. But if you go to the website, you can just click on email us, and you'll see the form that shows up for you just like that. And Kim, you got that as well. Thank you. And Greg, you got that as well. And Renee said thank you. So listen, guys, I really do appreciate, again, your willingness to spend some time. I want to tell you what's coming up in the next couple months. In the next month, that's in July, I'm going to be talking about cholesterol, the cholesterol myth, because that really is a Greg's asking a good question. Don't go anywhere. This is a good one. I like this one. It really is a myth that lowering your cholesterol, regardless of how you do it, is going to equate to you living one day longer. And I'm going to just blow the head off of everybody who thinks that getting your cholesterol tested and knowing what that number is actually equates to you living one day longer. In August, I'm going to talk about osteoporosis, how to build strong bones for a lifetime as well. And then I also just want to remind everybody that on our archives, every one of my recorded webinars is there from the past 2.5 years, 3 years of doing this. Lots of topics, lots of interesting things, good fodder for thought. Okay, Greg is asking a question. What about coffee enemas? And I have to tell you that there is a physiological reason why coffee enemas work, because when you deliver caffeine to your body that way, it has a direct effect on some of the blood vessels and vessels that go to and from the liver. And so it actually does cause a cleansing of the liver and a clearing of toxins with the liver having done all its work. If you do this, you want a couple things. I always say this with a little bit of joke, but make sure that the coffee's cool before you use it. You want it to be organic coffee. There's a physician that has a whole cancer treatment that is surrounded around coffee enemas, and I interviewed him on my radio show once upon a time years ago, and actually tried the whole coffee enema thing. And there is some science behind it. I have to tell you that I wouldn't say it's necessarily natural. We would be the only animal on the entire animal kingdom that would take a tube and stick it, somewhere like that. But we're also the only animal that are exposing ourselves to chemicals the way we do through our activities. And sometimes it's appropriate to be radical about that. But that would be one of the more radical things, that I think that there are other ways to enhance your body getting rid of toxins without going that far. And then he says Gerson therapy is based on it. Right, exactly. And the physician who has a whole treatment about pancreatic cancer is Nick Gonzalez up in New York. So anyways, hey, thanks for the questions. Thanks for your attention. I really do appreciate it. Again, I honor your willingness to spend some of your important time with me, and I hope you found it useful. I've got Renee saying that she agrees. She's an herbalist and was glad to hear that I'm of the same mindset. Great presentation. Thank you. Well, thank you, Renee. I appreciate it. And everybody have a great day, and we'll see you here soon.